All right, Belal Muhammed has long been one of the most polarizing figures in the UFC, or I don't know if polarizing is the right word, maybe just straight up disliked. Belal at this point has kind of more than anything made a name for himself as the most boring UFC fighter and a champion, I guess now a former champion. And this past weekend, with the UFC making its long-awaited return to the Centre Bell, we saw Belal try to change it up a bit, try to give the fans a little more of an exciting fight, which ultimately came with a very big cost. Because in a fight against one of the better boxers on the entirety of the UFC's roster, Belal made a conscious decision to have a lot of this fight take place on the feet, which in hindsight is crazy. I'm sure by the time this video comes out, Belal has already been memed to death after comparing his boxing ability to the likes of none other than Canelo Alvarez, and then proceeding to lose an MMA fight that most of which took place on the feet. He does at this point kind of have it coming. But I know for me, it's kind of hard to come away from this one feeling anything other than sympathetic for Belal. Because let's not forget how we ended up in this situation to begin with. Belal Muhammed, a guy who probably had deserved his title shot for a very long time, going on an unbeaten streak north of 10 fights, only to get skipped over for Colby Covington, who at the time hadn't fought in 2 years, but somehow due to weighing in as the backup fighter, was able to get a title shot. And by the way, it's a title shot against Leon Edwards, the guy who at that point in time had a no contest with Belal because of one of the most gruesome eye pokes that I've ever seen, that by the way, Belal was on the receiving end of and still somehow got punished for. And look, it is funny to talk about these things from an outside perspective, but when you really think about it, when Belal finally did get his title shot, by the way, I think it was a 36-year-old Belal at that time, he completely and totally dominated Leon Edwards with his wrestling in a way that neither Colby Covington or Kamaru Usman, two people that we were talking about as some of the best wrestlers in the history of welterweight, couldn't do. And let's not forget, Belal's biggest win before that was a TKO over Sean Brady, where Belal made a conscious effort to keep the fight totally on the feet and completely outboxed a young, up-and-coming, and at the time, undefeated fighter. And that, by the way, is a win that has aged amazingly. Sean Brady now coming off of a submission victory over Leon Edwards, the former champion. And Sean now is, I believe, actually legitimately ranked as the #1 contender, which brings me back to this fight between Belal Muhammed and Jack Della Maddalena, where at the end of the day, Jack won. But I thought this was a pretty competitive and close fight. When I was watching it live, I kind of have a feeling by the time we got to the 5th round that it was anyone's fight. Whoever wins that round wins the fight. And in that situation, Belal was actually finally able to get Jack down, which unfortunately for Belal, he wasn't able to make something happen out of it. By the time we get to the 5th round, both these guys are covered in sweat, covered in blood. Everyone's just slippery. And when the fight did get back to the feet, Belal was there in the pocket, ready, willing, and able to exchange after eating major shots. And Belal was able to land some really big shots in this one. And above all else, he did exactly what you want to see from a champion, which is fight it out all the way into the end. And look, no matter what you say about this fight, there's really no way to look at this like this was a boring fight. This was an entertaining title fight. And while it did, again, go the distance, this wasn't just another boring decision. This was a full-on back and forth war. And in a fight against a boxing heavy, younger, fresher fighter in Jack Della Maddalena, Belal at the end of the day is the one that made the decision to approach this fight in a way that made it into the war that it became. So as much as people love to just shit on the guy, he has been on the receiving end of nasty eye pokes, Dana White's just pure hatred for the guy. He clearly never wanted him to be the champion or to fight for the belt, and an MMA fan base that actively hated him for pretty much his entire run to and then through getting the belt. And in a sport like MMA, look, you got to appreciate whenever there's a guy that's able to get to the top of the mountain and still be a legitimately good guy despite it all. And look, we'll see what happens with Belal going forward, but as for now, our last memory of him inside the cage is him bearing it all, just putting it all on the line just to try to give the fans a show. And no matter how you feel about the guy, look, you gotta respect that. And as for Jack, his next fight deserves an entire video by itself, because even though he just got the belt, Jack has got himself one hell of a super fight coming his way. So yeah, in summary, stop shitting on Belal Muhammed. Or if you do, I don't know, just do it a little less or something. Thanks for watching.